What's going on, everyone? I'm just a typical, average American here today to react to a video which poses a very interesting question. Could Canada join the EU? And in addition to that question, I would ask, does Canada want to join the EU? I do think that Europe really, really likes Canada, so maybe they'd make some kind of exception. I mean, maybe rename the whole thing to the European Union and Canada. So, anyway, out of curiosity, I want to take a look at this and learn about, could Canada actually join the EU?
At the start of the year, The Economist published an article titled Why Canada Should Join the EU. At the time, the piece was widely
Oh.
ridiculed and touted as proof of The Economist's declining quality and credibility.
This was ridiculed. They made fun of this. They laughed at them for making this article. Why Canada should join the EU? Yeah, why should Canada join the EU? Did a Canadian write this? Have you guys ever talked about this? I don't feel like I've ever really seriously heard this argument, like why Canada should join the European Union. It's in the name. It's Europe. You know, Canada, it's not European, but Canada in many ways is kind of feels European, at least for me as an American. You know, it's kind of in between. It's interesting. It says Europe needs space and resources. Canada needs people. Let's make a deal. Ah, interesting. Very interesting.
Looks sort of prescient. As Trump's threats of tariffs and annexation against America's northern neighbour have escalated, Canadians have apparently started looking to the EU as a backup bestie. And a poll conducted by Abacus Data in late February found that an astonishing 44% plurality of Canadians thought Canada should join the EU.
What? This was this is 2025. This is very recent data. Whoa. That's a huge amount of Canadians that think that Canada probably should or definitely should join the EU. That is, I mean, joining the EU, what exactly does that even get you? It gets you a very close relationship with Europe, that's for sure. There's also like very specific things you get and are obligated to do when you are a member of the EU. Like, you gotta like use their currency. I think you gotta like use euros. You can travel between all of the European countries without even like having to show your passport. You can live and work in all the European countries in the EU like very easily. Everything is really shared and connected. So there's certainly a lot of benefits to it. I just didn't know a lot of Canadians even thought about this.
Compared to just 34% who thought Canada shouldn't. To be fair, Canada and the EU are already pretty chummy. Canada has a free trade agreement with the EU. It's an observer state in the Council of Europe, and it's a founding member of NATO, which has long been the foundation of Europe's security. On top of this, Canada's new Prime Minister, Mark Carney, who now looks likely to win the next election, went to France for his first foreign trip.
This video is a little bit old. This was like right before Carney became Prime Minister. They are correct. He did win the election and all that. So this is really kind of related to Canadians trying to distance themselves from the United States and become more of a partner with Europe, more of a trading partner and military partner. And yeah, in the last couple of months, I'm pretty sure a lot of stuff exactly like that has happened.
He described Canada as, quote, the most European of non-European countries.
Ha! Okay. If the Prime Minister of Canada is saying that, I feel like I'm not going too crazy here. where it's like, yeah, I mean, Canada, you use the metric system. That's pretty European.
And argued that Canada and Europe are stronger together. So, in this video, we thought we'd take a look at whether Canada could actually become the 28th member state of the European Union.
Is that even possible? Like, it's in the name. The European Union. It's in the name.
Let's get straight into it. The short answer to this question is no. Canada won't be joining.
Oh, God. All right. Well, that's it. Let's wrap it up. Thanks for watching. That's the end. No. No, there's like a bunch more after this, but the short answer is no. That's kind of boring.
The EU anytime soon. Now, you might think that this is simply down to geography. After all, Article 49 of the EU's founding treaty states that only European states can apply for membership.
Yeah.
And Canada isn't obviously European.
Yeah.
But we don't think this is actually disqualifying.
Really?
For starters, Article 49 doesn't define what it means by European. And this is obviously a contested concept.
What? Come on. All right. This is what happens when you start thinking about things too deeply and you get into all the nuances and what does it mean technically to be European? Like the technical definition? I don't know. To be in Europe? Well, I think we all pretty much know where that is.
The EU's predecessor, the European Community, tried to answer this question more precisely in a 1992 document titled Europe and the Challenge of Enlargement.
Yeah, all right. I guess there's like European colonies and nations like around the world. There's like little islands in random places, like in South America or something, that are technically part of the Great Britain. So I guess it's kind of a weird definition.
But they basically concluded that a strict definition was impossible, admitting that the term European, quote, combines geographical, historical, and cultural elements.
Okay.
And that it is neither possible nor opportune to establish now the frontiers of the European Union, whose contours will be shaped over many years to come.
Oh.
Culturally, Canada has pretty European vibes. It's a European-style social democracy, with a well-developed welfare state and deep historical links to both France and the UK.
That's very true. That's really, yeah. Canada, you're very European. Very exotic. Very cultural. It's kind of cool.
The geographical definition of Europe is also clearly elastic. After all, Cyprus is geographically closer to West Asia than continental Europe, and Malta is geographically closer to North Africa. Turkey is also generally considered a mostly West Asian country, but it's nonetheless an official EU candidate country. And Algeria, which is obviously in Africa, not Europe, was included in the European Economic Community until its independence from France in 1962.
Oh, wow. There's already been like a bunch of exceptions to this stuff already. So, yeah, Canada not physically being in Europe is not as big a deal as I thought.
It's also true to say that Canada shares a close sea border with the EU via Saint-Pierre-et-Miquelon, a French territory off the coast of Newfoundland. And
What? Wait, what? 'Cause I heard France somehow bordered Canada, but it sounded made up. It didn't make any sense. There's actually like a little French thing in Canada, so they're technically because I had heard about that, and I was like, that doesn't make any sense.
a land border with the territory of an EU member state via Greenland, although we should say that Greenland isn't actually part of the EU. Canada and Denmark actually used to have a hilariously amicable border dispute over a tiny island called Hans Island, which sits in between the Canadian territory of Nunavut and northern Greenland. In 1984, Canadian soldiers briefly visited the island, leaving a Canadian flag and a bottle of Canadian whiskey. Later that year, Danish officials responded by replacing the Canadian flag with a Danish flag and the whiskey with a bottle of Danish schnapps.
I've heard of this. I've heard about this funny story between Canada and Denmark, like fighting over this island and leaving booze and
The two countries continued this dance, known as the Whiskey War, for 40 years,
Oh my God.
intermittently exchanging their national flags and boozes. This lasted until 2022, when, in the aftermath of Putin's invasion of Ukraine, they divided the island in two, intended as a
Oh.
symbolic proof that border disputes can be resolved peacefully.
Oh, wow.
Nonetheless, even if
Oh, that's kind of nice. I didn't know about that. That's somehow a very Canadian like story.
Article 49 doesn't necessarily prohibit Canada from joining, it's still not going to happen, for the same reason that even well-established candidate countries are struggling to get into the bloc at the moment. Accession requires unanimity amongst other member states, which is hard to imagine, and much of the EU is currently suffering from what's known as enlargement fatigue.
So there's a lot of countries that want to be in the EU that can't even get in. That are in Europe or close to Europe. So even if Canada wanted to be in the EU, there's no guarantee that it would be voted in because does it need a unanimous voting decision? That's very tough.
In other words, the EU has spent all of its political energy in recent years bringing new countries into the bloc. But there's now a sense that A, the EU currently needs to focus on other stuff like guaranteeing Ukraine's security without American support, and B, the EU needs reform before it brings other members into the bloc. It's already difficult to achieve unanimity amongst current member states. Hungary is constantly vetoing, and lots of countries think the EU either needs to slim down or reform its voting rules to become more geopolitically agile.
Hungary wouldn't allow Canada into the EU. No, I don't know that for sure, but they just veto everything. That's just what Hungary does.
Nonetheless, we think there's one big caveat here, and that is that you could imagine Canada joining the outer tier of some sort of multi-speed EU. This idea of a multi-speed EU with different tiers of membership has been around for a while, and
Tiers of membership? Oh no. Don't get into the membership tiers. This is like Netflix now. Why has everything got to have tiers? Oh my gosh. And then what? So Canada, you get like the base tier of the EU membership. What is this? And then how much does that cost a month? Like $15.99 a month, and you get ads? Like, what are we talking about? What do you mean the tiers of EU membership?
French President Emmanuel Macron was actually pushing for the idea of a four-tier Europe in late 2023
What?
to deal with the EU's ongoing institutional problems. After all, if obstructionist members like Hungary were in some sort of outer tier, they could haggle over less central issues, while a better integrated European core could get on with things.
What? Who has to be on the outer tier? Then who gets to be on the EU Pro tier, or whatever they are going to call it, EU Plus? This is basically a way just to like give some members of the EU less voting power, and to, like, what? Who gets to decide?
Anyway, Macron's idea sort of died off, largely because substantial reform to the EU's institutional arrangement would require treaty change, which would in turn require unanimity. And it's hard to see every member state agreeing to this plan if they know they might end up with less influence in a tiered Europe.
Exactly. Yeah, okay, good. I thought I was going crazy here. Like, that doesn't make any sense. All right, so that's exactly what they're saying.
Than they have at the moment. However, there are reasons to think a tiered Europe might be on the way, largely because the EU is increasingly reliant on joint borrowing, i.e. debt issued at the EU level. This first happened during COVID, and the EU already owes some 300 billion euros to creditors, but it's been restarted to aid Europe's rearmament. This is essentially because few European countries have the fiscal space to afford steep increases in defence spending without politically difficult cuts elsewhere, and the EU can borrow at pretty cheap rates. The reason we think this could lead to a tiered Europe is that this money will eventually need to be paid back, presumably via direct taxes levied by the EU.
See, Canada, maybe you don't even want to be part of the EU. They're gonna put you at some bottom tier of the subscription service, and you're joining this organization that's in like billions of dollars of debt, and I don't know. I'm sure there's obviously big benefits, but Canada can just make deals with Europe and military and trade deals with Europe without becoming part of the EU. That's kind of what nullifies the entire thought process, I would think. Canada can just continue doing what Canada does and being Canada and not having to be beholden to any organization like the EU while still creating like partnerships and deals with Europe outside of the EU.
Given it's hard to imagine member states agreeing to an enormous increase in national contributions, and giving Brussels the right to tax is probably the only way to maintain the EU's exceptional credit rating. This will probably create a core of countries who are happy to join in a European fiscal union, and an outer shell who aren't, and who would then be excluded from future joint borrowing initiatives.
Oh.
Canada might qualify for this outer core, and well, this could be a pretty good deal. After all, Canada is a big, empty, mineral-rich country, while Europe is densely populated and mineral-poor.
Yeah.
At TLDR News, we're always trying to help you.
I think that's it. Okay, that's the end. Sounds like the EU would get a lot out of Canada. What would Canada get out of the EU from this? They didn't get into that too much, but they focused mostly on could Canada technically even become part of the EU, join the EU? Technically, it's unclear. Isn't that a fun way to end the video? It's unclear. Probably no. I think that's what we kind of concluded here. But it doesn't really matter. Canada is making deals with the EU already anyway, without needing to be in the EU. So it's going to work out for Canada probably arguably better that way, right? Or I don't know everything about this, but it was an interesting question that I wanted to learn more about and figure out what's going on and what Canadians are thinking about this. And for the most part, that's what I got out of this. So this was actually pretty fun to learn about. Anyway, if you enjoyed this too, feel free to give this video a like or leave a comment. Especially if you're Canadian, do you want Canada to join the EU? That'd be cool to hear about. And if you're interested in more videos like this, me reacting to Canada and learning about Canadian culture and seeing Canadian things I've never seen before, feel free to subscribe for more. And until then, thanks for watching and see you next time.